Before you go out and buy that vacation rental that your family can use as a getaway and hope that it's a good investment at the same time and that it's gonna bring in income and it's not gonna be this huge financial burden, I'm gonna explain in this video how you can be sure that you're buying a great property that you can use personally, and it's also a great investment at the same time, and it's gonna kick off a whole bunch of cash flow. Because it breaks my heart, I have this conversation all the time with people who said, I went out and I bought a vacation rental because I heard short-term rentals are this great investment. So I went to the place where we would like to vacation, bought this property that seemed like a great investment, and then afterwards we realized it's actually not a great investment. It's not bringing in any income. It's actually sucking cash from us on a monthly basis. And so I thought I was buying this blessing that was going to give us time together as a family and thought it was going to be a financial benefit, but instead now I'm having to work longer hours to support this thing that's sucking all of our extra cash flow. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you how you can have the best of both worlds. A great property that you and your family can use yourself, and something that's going to kick off cash flow on a continuous basis and be a huge financial blessing at the same time. So we literally just got back to Indiana from Southwest Florida just a couple days ago. We were down there for about 3 weeks with the kids. We were setting up our latest 4 short-term rental units. And with these new units, it brings us up to 30 short-term rental listings. And we have learned so much since setting up that first short-term rental listing so many years ago. And in this video, I'm going to share with you some of those key lessons learned, especially if the goal is to buy a solid short-term rental investment that kicks off a ton of cash on a monthly basis, and also something that you can use yourself with your family. Because that's the intent for us with these 4 new listings down in Southwest Florida. We want to use them ourselves. That's one of the side benefits of this business, so that we can get out of the Indiana winters when we want to, but also know that we have a solid investment that's going to pay us cash flow on a regular basis. So it's almost like you get paid to vacation. There's really 4 main things that I recommend you really consider if this is your goal. And so let's dive into those things. But before we do, I just want to mention that I work with people personally to walk them through the entire process of buying their first really high cash flowing short-term rental. So if you're interested in working with me in that program, you can set up a call with me personally to discuss it and share your goals, and we can talk through the details of the program and see if it's a good fit for you. So there's a link that just popped up at the bottom of the screen. It's livingoffrentals.com/call. You can go to that link, fill out a short questionnaire, and you can set up a call directly with me. Number 1, if you want the best of both worlds, you want a property you can use yourself and something that's a great investment, then the first thing I want you to think through is how can you achieve the best economies of scale on your investment? So what do I mean by this? So for example, the properties that we just bought in Southwest Florida are 2 duplexes. So that's how we come up with the 4 units. We have 2 separate properties, and they're both side-by-side duplexes with a shared wall in the middle. So why would we do this? Well, we first started looking at the general area that we wanted to purchase in. We first realized that building a property still made sense. There's some areas where once you've built a property, the value of that property is actually lower than the cost to build, so it doesn't make sense. But in Southwest Florida, it still makes sense to build even with the rising cost of construction. So that made sense. And so we looked then at the models that the builder was building, and we realized that for the single family homes that most people were gravitating toward, the single family with the pool, it's a 5-bedroom, 2.5 or 3-bath property with a pool, that was going for in the low 400s. And then when we looked at the duplexes, they were selling in the low 500s, also with a pool. So what we did is we modified the 2 sides of the duplex to eliminate the garages and add more living space. So each side is now a 4-2, and it has that shared pool in the back. It still has that amenity that most people want in Southwest Florida. So now we have 2 separate units that rent for just under what a single family would on each side, and it cost us just over $100,000 more to build a property like that as opposed to the single family home. So when it comes to ROI, or the return that you get on every single dollar you invest in the property, it's so much higher when you have economies of scale and can create multiple units worth of income with one individual property. So this doesn't have to be a traditional duplex or triplex. It can be any number of creative solutions to come up with economies of scale, multiple streams of income on one property. So that's what I would start with if the goal is to have both a great property you can use yourself and something that's going to bring in great income. Number two, I would highly recommend considering areas that are just outside of the prime vacation area or the city itself. What most people do is they're drawn toward a specific area or a specific city, and they kind of put blinders on when it comes to their investment. And they don't consider all the areas around there. They could still check all the boxes that they're looking for, but they could purchase at a fraction of the cost. So for example, we just built these 2 duplexes in Port Charlotte, Florida, and it was much more affordable to do this there than for that same property in, say, Sanibel Island or Fort Myers Beach, or anywhere else in Florida that is a prime vacation area. But at the same time, we still have a great property with a pool that still has pretty close access to the ocean, and it's close to a lot of restaurants and other things to do. So we're not sacrificing in terms of checking the boxes that we were looking for. And at the same time, the nightly rate isn't that much different than some of these much more expensive areas. So we got a property for a fraction of the price, but we're still capitalizing on the upside of a nightly rate that still is pretty strong. You'll see this pretty commonly in areas just outside of the prime vacation rental areas all throughout the US. Number three is don't go over the top on your material choices or your fixtures or finishes. It just isn't going to make sense financially unless you're building some super high-end luxury vacation rental. If you are, you're probably independently wealthy anyway, and you're not looking for cash flow. And so God bless, put in whatever you want. But if the goal is cash flow and you're following this system, then if you look at the difference in cost between a lot of finishes or fixtures or appliances that are super high-end compared to ones that are sort of middle of the road, it's not like a 10% or a 20% difference or more expensive for the high-end stuff. It's typically like 3, 4, 5, 10 times more expensive for the really high-end refrigerator than it is for the middle of the road stainless steel refrigerator that's going to serve your purpose. So again, as long as it's checking the box and you're going to be comfortable there, looks decent, I don't recommend putting in the cheapest of the cheap, but something middle of the road. What happens a lot of times is people get emotionally wrapped up in this because they're going to be using it themselves, and they start to say, well, I'll just go a little bit higher end on each of these things. And then at the end of the day, they all add up to a price point that no longer makes sense, and it's going to eat into your cash flow on a monthly basis. And number four, if you follow the 3 previous steps and you pick a property that does cash flow really well and that makes sense financially, then you can get creative with your financing and afford a property that you might never have considered that you'd be able to afford and be able to use with your family, and it pays you on a monthly basis. So what I mean by this is if the numbers make sense and it's a great deal and it kicks off a bunch of cash flow, then there's a lot of private investors out there that you could approach and say, hey, I'm going to go out and find this deal that's going to cash flow X amount per month, several $1,000s per month, and let's partner on it. I'll do all the legwork on the deal. You bring the financing that we need in addition to what the bank's going to provide, which is typically about 80% is what the bank will give you. So you bring the other 20% and we'll split the deal down the middle and we'll own it 50-50. We can set up an LLC that owns it, or we can just create a joint venture and we'll own it together. And I'll do all the legwork. I'll take care of it. You can use it with your family. I can use it with my family when I want to. We can set up an agreement of how long each of us use it. Obviously, we don't want to use it all the time because it's going to eat into our cash flow, but we can use it when we want to go on vacation, and it's also going to pay us a great income. And if the cash flow from that deal makes sense to where if the guy's putting in $100,000 and he's still making 10, 15% or whatever on his money from the cash flow, plus he's getting the tax benefits of owning real estate now, he's getting the appreciation over the long term, it can make a ton of sense. So you could literally get into a vacation rental without a dime out of your pocket. But the key is it has to make sense financially. You have to follow the first 3 principles to find a deal that makes sense financially in order to be able to use creative finance and make it make sense for somebody else to put their money into it so that it can make sense for both of you. So that's exactly what we did on one of these short-term rentals in Southwest Florida, and that's one of the options that I teach amongst many others in my first vacation rental investment blueprint program. So again, if you're interested in that program, you can set up a call with me at the link that just popped up. I appreciate you joining me for this video. God bless, and I'll see you in the next video.